Hi everyone, welcome to today's talk show with me, Mariatta. I'm your host today, and today's topic is all about PEPs. We got a few callers on the line asking questions about PEPs, so let's get to the first question.
I always thought that in Python, a PEP is a style guide documentation. I overheard people talking about PEP 703, PEP 572, and so on. Are these all style guides? How many style guides does Python need?
Alright, yes. So thanks for this question. Here's the thing. You're thinking of PEP 8, which is the style guide documentation. So a PEP is not actually style guide documentation. PEP 8 is. But there are actually lots of different kinds of PEPs, and there's no other style guides except for PEP 8 and PEP 7. PEP 7 is the C style guide for CPython. So a PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposal. So it is a documentation. It's a design documentation for when you want to make major changes to Python. So PEP 8 is just one of such proposals. So PEP 8, at one point, they proposed that Python could be better if we adopted a consistent style guide. So PEP 8 is that style guide. So the PEP process in the Python core development team, this is the mechanism for proposing major new features. So during the PEP process, the Python core development team, we seek community input about this new feature that's being proposed, and then we need to document all the different decisions about this. Now, as the PEP author will be responsible for documenting all of the discussions and also for building the consensus about this feature. So since Python is still actively maintained and it is an open source project, so there's always new proposals from the community members on how to make Python even better. And that's why you will see lots of different types of PEPs out there, and new PEPs are still being written. So thank you for the question. Let's go to the next caller.
If a PEP is for enhancing Python, then does it mean that there is a PEP for every bug fixes and feature requests? Thanks for answering.
So, okay, not everything needs a PEP. So in fact, most changes won't need a PEP. If you have a bug to report, and then fixing that bug will definitely make Python better, right? It will enhance Python, but most bugs will not need a PEP. So if you have bug reports, you can do that by open a ticket on the CPython's GitHub repository. If you need to fix some typos, again, fixing typos will help improve the documentation, but you don't need a PEP for that. Here's where a PEP will be needed. If the change you wanna make involves a change in the language, in the Python programming language, adding a new keyword, the syntax, changing the grammar, then you will need a PEP. Okay, you wanna add a new module to the standard library, you need a PEP. So for example, like when f-strings, which is something new in Python 3.6, we didn't have this in Python 2.7. So when before f-strings was added, there was a PEP for this, PEP 498, to discuss this feature before it gets added in. Assignment expressions, like that's the walrus operator, there was a PEP for that, PEP 572, and exception groups, which is really new, and this is starting in Python 3.11. You should check it out. There was a PEP for that, PEP 654. So removing Python GIL is a big deal. It's going to be a big effort. There's a PEP for that. That's been discussed for years. So there's lots of PEPs for wanting to make changes to Python programming language. But here's the thing. Python is not just about code, right? Python is an open source community. So when we have a community, we have users and contributors and core developers, and there are other aspects involved in managing this kind of community than just writing code. So not only we have PEPs for improving the language for code changes, we actually have all other kinds of PEPs as well. For example, there is a series of PEPs related to the governance of the core Python development team. For example, when Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python, stepped down from being the Python BDFL, we came up with a different governance model. We have to propose what kind of governance model we want to adopt, and we have PEPs for those. So now we have the Python Steering Council that gets elected once a year, and that is also written down in a PEP, like the role of the steering council, the role of the core developers, all written down in a PEP, in the governance PEPs. Another important type of PEP that I think you all should know about is the PEP for capturing the Python release cycle, the release schedule, basically. So sometimes people would ask, where can they find out information about which Python is still being maintained, or when will there be a new Python version? When will it be released? So the source of truth for this kind of release schedules for the Python, we have something called release PEPs, okay? Also a PEP. And you can also find a more user-friendly version of the release schedule. We have a table with graphs in the Python dev guide, but still the dev guide takes information from the PEP. So the PEP is the source of truth. So those are the different kind of PEPs out there. So thank you for the question. Let's go to the next question.
How does this work? Can anyone make a proposal to Python? Can I contribute to and write a PEP for Python?
Yeah. So yes, you can write a PEP. Anyone can write a PEP. But here's the thing: before you actually write a PEP, a PEP being a proposal, you must have something that you want to propose, right? An idea. And so the whole process on how to write a PEP is described in PEP 1. So there's even a PEP for this. So actually, if you read PEP 1, it will say how to start writing a PEP. You should start with having an idea for Python, right? Here's the thing. I think the way I see it, the successful PEPs so far, they don't really start with an idea, but like you start with actually a problem, okay? You must have a problem that just cannot be solved by Python the way it is now. So the problem that cannot be solved unless you change the language, unless you actually make some changes to the core. So, but still, like this, the beginning of how about writing a PEP is that have a problem, discuss this problem, bring it up to other Python contributors, to the Python core developers. You don't even need to have a solution to it yet. Just bring it up and start discussing it in one of our public forum, and start by opening an issue, a thread on our discourse forum, and start discussing. And as the discussion begin, maybe you or maybe someone else will come up with a solution. And maybe the solution that's being proposed turns out to be big and require changes to the language, to the syntax. So that's when you will be told, all right, I think you should write a PEP for this. So that's how you get to write a PEP. I don't think people just suddenly wake up and say, hey, I'm gonna write a PEP today. What should I write it about? So I just don't think that's how it works. So thank you for the question. Let's go to the next one.
So it sounds like PEPs are for people who contribute to the Python standard library. As a regular user, why do I need to care about all of these?
All right, so why do you need to care about all of this? You know, you as a user of Python, you are the Python community members, and in fact, you do have a voice in all of this. So even though, yes, this is for making changes to Python, but these changes will impact you as well. The community input are taken into consideration during the PEP discussion period. That's when we want to hear what the community think about this proposed feature. And again, remember, like what PEPs are for. They are for major, big changes to the core of the language. Maybe you get a new keyword, you get a new module, like something you're gonna need to learn and use. And maybe something in the language gets removed. So what if there's something new could end up breaking your code, your product, your maybe you maintain an open source library that depends on some feature in Python. So it matters to you. So you need to know about PEPs, and the best time to bring up concern, like if you really disagree about this because it will break your code, is during the PEP discussion period before it got accepted. So if a PEP got accepted, usually it's really hard for you to change our mind about it. So if you really have some concern about a feature, a PEP, bring it up before the discussion period, and that's why you need to understand about how this whole thing works. And once the PEP got accepted, that means now we're gonna have code changes, right? Learn about this and check whether these changes will be compatible with your code base. So you can actually, usually during the alpha period, that's when we really want people to test your code base against this new feature. And again, sometimes, even though it's the steering council that's making decision about PEPs, sometimes there are edge cases we just don't know about. And maybe you have a certain unique situation that we didn't know about. You're gonna bring this up with the steering council so that we can get it addressed. So as user and as Python community member, you too can help enhance Python and make it better. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for listening to my pep talk.